Come, ye thankful people, come, raise the song of harvest home. All is safely gathered in, ere the winter storms begin. God our Maker doth provide for our wants to be supplied. Come to God's own temple, come, raise the song of harvest home. Our nation's destroyed. They burned the temple to the ground. We're thousands of miles away from home. We watched what they did to our mothers and our fathers. And they broke down the walls of Jerusalem. Where are you, God? Why didn't you deliver? Why do we even waste time believing in you any longer? That's the story of Daniel. That's how it started. You come forward to 1939 to 1945, when 6 million Jews were incinerated, gassed, shot in the back of the head, destroyed. Supposedly the final solution, trying to wipe out the Jewish race from the face of the earth. Many of the Jewish people even today have nothing to do with God because they think God abandoned them. Where was God when we needed Him? Why did He let such an awful thing happen? But in 1948, God started bringing the Jewish people back to the land of Israel. From all over the world. Those from Europe and from the Slavic countries forgot that there were also Jews in Africa. And so some of them are having problems with the Ethiopian and the African Jews coming home. Or you see, a lot of times the oppressed forget and become the oppressors. Where is God? He's always there. Generally ignored when you don't want to listen to Him. Where's God in our country today? He's exactly where He has always been. Only this time, God would say, I'm a gentleman. When you ask me to get out of your politics, and you ask me to get out of your schools, and you ask me to get out of your homes, I left. Now, how's that working for you? Generally, because that's the way we come into this world wired up, we soon learn to blame somebody else for everything, minimizing our bad choices, minimizing our decisions. And then when God says okay, we get upset. Actually, where God's concerned, He can't win for losing. We ask Him to leave, He leaves, and we get mad because He left. I don't understand. But that's the way of man. You've been around me very long, and you know that I believe the Bible's the Word of God, and I believe that if it says it, that's what happened. Okay? 3 fantastic stories today in the life of Daniel. It was the best of times, eventually, But it was the worst of times most of the time. What do you have to be thankful for? No matter what the time is for you, God is in it. Let me say that again. No matter what the time is for you, God is in it. And for that you can be thankful. And sometimes He saves us from it becoming so much worse. But we sometimes don't see that, do we? Well, I tell you what, I could spend 1 week on each of these stories and need another 2 weeks to wrap up. But that's not how this is designed. Daniel is in exile. Test number 1. He and his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. That was their names. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Thankfully, the 4 of them got to stick together when they were carried off into Babylon. They were seen as the young and up and coming and could be of great use to King Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar picked the best, the cream of the crop of what was there, and he decided he was going to put them through 2 years of training and then basically turn the government over to them. That's how these guys ruled. They didn't have their own people, enough of them, so they took the conquered peoples and took the best of the conquered peoples and trained them in the ways of Babylon. Culture, customs, religion, administration, all of it. They get to eat at the king's table. Now, you got to understand, in the book of the law, God told them there was a variety of things that they could eat, and there were some things to stay away from. In fact, if we would go back to all of that, and forgive me, Lord, but I'd have a hard time giving up ham and bacon and pork chops, because pork would go out the window. So they were eating delicacies from the king's table and drinking a whole copious amount of wine. And Daniel knew that everything on that table, basically, he shouldn't be eaten because he is an observant Jew. There are cultural Jews who are born that way, and then there are observant Jews who are born into it or convert to it and decide to practice it. Just as there are cultural Christians and there are practicing Christians. A whole bunch of our nation, if you were to ask them, would say, well, I'm a Christian, but you sure don't live like it. In fact, there's a whole bunch of people who go to church who are cultural Christians because they're not living like it either. Just because you put your butt in the pew every Sunday doesn't make you a Christian. Any more than parking yourself in the garage makes you a shivvy. Okay? Daniel practices what he believes and preaches. So he went, and this was dangerous. He went to the head of all of those, the guy that was supposed to be in charge of all these people, because his life is on the line if things don't go right. And he said, we can't eat at that table. Now immediately somebody said, well, not good enough for you? No, that's not what it is. We're not trying to disrespect anybody. We just can't eat that. Which, by the way, Gina, I'm sorry, but there's garlic in the dressing. There's no other way I could do it. It's not that I put the garlic in. I realized after I made it, I used a whole bunch of that Texas toast that was left over from Compass, and it was lathered in garlic. So, just giving you a high sign. Okay? So Daniel said, could we just have beans and water? The guy says, well, I don't know about that. I don't know if I can do that. Because if you don't turn out right, I'm in trouble. Daniel says, give us 10 days. you give us vegetables and water, and let them do what they're doing. And at the end of the 10 days, check us over physically and intellectually and see how it's working out. Well, to make a long story short, at the end of 10 days, those who ate vegetables and water were way ahead of those who were eating at the king's table. So much so that the guy in charge of all of them decided everybody was going to eat vegetables and drink water. Now you can imagine how popular that made Daniel with everybody. In fact, I think that shows up later in the story because I don't think some of them ever forgot it. And the king, when he examined them, was amazed. And so he put them over his whole court. And God honored them by giving the 4 young men knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And he gave Daniel an extra gift of understanding visions and dreams of all kinds. Now I know we think visions and dreams has everything to do with Eastern mysticism and crystals and pyramids and all that stuff. No, dreams and visions were very much part of God's plan for a long, long time. And I'm here to tell you, he can still use dreams and visions. Now, when it happens, you know beyond a shadow of a doubt it happened. You don't go looking for it. You don't go asking for it. But when it happens, you know it. King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. Story 2. King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. But you know, like, it troubled him greatly. But it's like a lot of dreams. You wake up the next morning, you know you had a bad dream, but you don't remember what it was. And so King Nebuchadnezzar says to his court astrologers and those people that are supposed to know what's going on, I need you to interpret my dream. Well, what is it? I don't remember. Now, he being king can say this. He said, you tell me the dream and you interpret it. And if you don't, I'm going to kill all of you. Woo! That's the kind of king Nebuchadnezzar was. He could get real full of himself real fast. And so they said, King, that's impossible. Never mind. That's what's going to happen. In the midst of all of this, Daniel comes forward and he tells his 3 buddies, who by the way have been renamed. He's Belshazzar, they're Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he tells his 3 buddies, you pray for me. Let's go before the Lord and ask the Lord to get us through this situation. And God honors their prayers. And he tells Daniel exactly what's going in. Daniel goes into the king and he says, I've got what you need. So don't go killing anybody. And he basically told King Nebuchadnezzar, you saw a great high image that had gold, silver, bronze, iron, clay, so to speak. Basically what that's all about, King, is that your gold, you're the gold part. That's Babylon. But Babylon's going to fall. And he doesn't give the names, but we know from history what the next ones are. The silver one was the Medo-Persian Empire. They defeated Babylon. And then Greece, under Alexander the Great, defeated them. And then Rome defeated Greece. So he's taken them all the way from Nebuchadnezzar to Jesus in history. By the way, whether you want to admit it or not, God's in charge of history. God's in charge of history. Stuff that's happened does not surprise him one iota. He's in charge. Does he make it happen? No. But he lets it happen because he knows the decisions people are going to make. He doesn't make them make them. Keep that straight. So at that point, the king is so impressed that he puts Daniel in charge of everybody. Sometime later, we do not know where Daniel's at. But he does this tremendous prayer, thanking God. By the way, when God answers, Daniel throws a celebration. I'm here to tell you that when God answers, you better celebrate. When God answers, you better celebrate. You better act like it. You know what happens many times? God answers a lot of prayers, and you don't write them down, you don't celebrate them, and you forget them, and then you go back to Him mumbling and complaining again. Oh, woe is me. God says, don't you remember what I've already done for you? What have you done for me lately? That's a height of ingratitude. Amen? Amen. Sorry, guys. Either you're really tired or I'm losing you. I've got 4 went to sleep already. Okay. See if I can ramp this up a little bit.
Who went to sleep?
So the king, I guess because he remembered that image in his dream finally, he decides to make him a big old image. Put it on the plains of Babylon. And everybody's going to worship the image, which is the image of Nebuchadnezzar. In other words, Nebuchadnezzar saying, I'm going to be God, and you're going to worship me. I told you he could get full of himself. And he does that quite often. Well, when everybody hits the ground, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego don't, it's obvious. And this happened more than once. So some of the guys that are probably still mad about the vegetables in the water, I don't know, I just like to throw that in there. Go in and say, hey, Nebuchadnezzar, remember that rule that you made? Well, those Jewish people, they're thumbing their nose at you. So he calls Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in and asks them, what's going on? And they said, we're not going to bow down. We're not going to do it. We will not do it. That threw Nebuchadnezzar into a rage, and he said, what God's going to take you out of my hand? Who's going to rescue you now? Smart aleck. And here's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said. Listen to this. King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and He will deliver us from your hand. Listen to what they say next. But even if He does not, we want you to know, Your Majesty, we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you've set up. God will save me, but if He doesn't, I'm still not going to bow. They wouldn't bend, they wouldn't bow, they wouldn't burn. Remember that song, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Okay, we're not going to get into that. There's several reasons. But I want you to know they wouldn't bend, they weren't going to bow, and they are not going to burn either. He was so angry, he hopped that thing up 7 times hotter than it ever been done before. He bundled them up, and the guards, when they went to throw them into the furnace, the flames leapt out and killed the guards, and they go tumbling into the middle of the furnace. Now, I don't know how he did it, but he had an observation deck. And so he decides to get up and watch those crispy critters. Only, there's people walking around in the middle of the fire. And Nebuchadnezzar said, what's going on? Didn't we throw 3 in there? I see a 4th one. that looks like the Son of God. Some would say an angel came and saved him. But I don't think those words are a misstatement. I have this crazy little thing in my head, and this will get me in trouble with the theologians, but it's still there, and I'm going to throw it out. There are many times in the Old Testament when I think Jesus shows up. I believe he showed up when he's talking to Abraham about Sodom and Gomorrah. And I believe he showed up and he's standing in the fire with those guys. Nebuchadnezzar had them bring him out. Now, you all watched me almost catch the thing on fire this morning. Somebody had stuck that torch in the middle of that decoration, and when I pulled it out, it still had grass on the end of it. And I didn't notice, and I set some grass on fire, and up there going,
Okay, it's your story.
I want you to know when they brought those guys out, their hair wasn't even singed. You put hair around fire, it was... Jerry, we can make you bald real fast. That'd get us in trouble because that's his crown of glory. Their hair wasn't singed. You ever been around smoke? What does it do to your clothes? I went to a function here in August, and they were smoking cigars, and the cigars smelled pretty good. I actually didn't choke on it. I thought, this smells pretty good. I walked in the door at home, and my wife goes, and she's smelling me like a dog. And I'm going, she knew where I was at. She knew what this was going to be. She says, you don't understand. It smells like her daddy. Her daddy smoked cigars. And for a moment, she got a little bit of joy. Remembering her daddy. So I guess I'll go to sticking cigars every year if I get a chance. And make Mary feel good when I come home. Their clothes didn't even smell like it. Nebuchadnezzar realizes he suddenly is drained of himself, and he realizes who the God really is. And he tells his whole nation, you pay attention to their God. Interesting, isn't it? Moving right along. Nebuchadnezzar's died, and his son Belshazzar is on the throne. And Belshazzar is just like his daddy. He's full of himself all the time. And he throws a big party for all of the nation, and he wants to impress people. So he says, bring all of those gold instruments and cups and everything out of the temple. We're going to drink and we're going to praise our God, because that God, he's nothing. In the middle of the banquet, a big old hand appears on the wall and starts writing. The king goes weak in his knees. He knows to call for Daniel. Tells Daniel he'll make him second in the kingdom. Put a robe of purple on. Daniel says, I don't want your gifts, but here's what's going to happen. God has weighed you in the balance, and you've been found wanting, and tonight Babylon falls. Mene, tekel, upharsin. You have been weighed in the balance and been found wanting. What they didn't know, the engineers for the Medo-Persian army were already working on the Euphrates River, and they diverted the river and came in under the walls of Babylon through the gates where the river would have been. And Babylon fell. Darius becomes king. Daniel so impressed the Babylonians that he somehow immediately impresses the conqueror. And they put him in charge. He's one of three that's put in charge. Well, you know, politics and everything. People get a little irritated when somebody's above them. They got to yank them down a couple notches. They tried to find dirt on Daniel. Now, where in politics can you try to find dirt on somebody and there's nothing there? They couldn't find anything on Daniel. But they realized if they got him, it was going to have to do with something about his God. Well, they noticed he would pray 3 times a day with an open window, pray 3 times a day facing Jerusalem. So they made the king come up with a law that for 30 days, no one was allowed to pray to anybody except Darius. It's a pretty heady thing when people want you to become their God. Darius wrote it out. Well, according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, if you wrote out a law, you couldn't change it. Not even the king could change it. They knew it. The trap is set. They catch Daniel praying. They go into Darius. You know those Jews from Jerusalem? It's interesting how when they want to be derisive, it's always those Jews. It's been that way all down through history. It's that way today. Daniel's not praying to you. He gets thrown the lion's den. That was their method of capital punishment that day. Darius couldn't do anything about it. So he said, okay. And he says to Daniel, may your God be with you. And they threw Daniel in the lion's den. King didn't eat, listen to music, or sleep all night. He gets up the next morning and runs to the mouth of the den. And he yells, Daniel, servant of the Most High God, was he able to save you? And he hears from the depth of the den, live forever, King Darius. My God closed the mouth of the lion. And he brought him out. Now Darius knew that they had trapped him and he didn't like it. So he took all of the officials, and there was many. And he decreed that because they tried to set a trap, he decreed that the officials and their families and children would be thrown into the lion's den. And it happened, and they were all dead before they hit the bottom. It wasn't that the lions were on a diet. God closed their mouths. Can our God do things like that today? And if you're not sure, it's because you haven't been thankful in a while. God's been doing things for you too. You just don't remember. And you need to sit down today, get you out a piece of paper, and start writing down what God's done for you. And then you'll get off your pity potty having your pity parties, which only gives you a ring on your behind. Quit bad-mouthing God. He's a good, good Father. And that's just Daniel. You stick with us. Wait till we get to Jesus. You haven't seen anything yet. You may think fiery furnace and lion's den is huge, and it is huge, but that is child's play compared to what God's got ready. And I want you to know something. He's coming back. You want him to? And when he comes in all his glory in the clouds, I hope you run out to meet him. Well, you're not going to have to worry about running out to meet him since we're going to meet him in the air. I'm going to have to ask the Lord for Dramamine. They have me flying through the air. I'm going to be a mess. Nobody will want to be close to me. But you know what? If the Lord can overcome other things, he can overcome that too. We'll be so happy to meet him in the air, we won't even think about it. But now that I'm firmly planted on the ground, I think about it. So, Didn't think Daniel could be a Thanksgiving sermon, did you?